Hey, I'm Reggie Brock. I'm a National Account Manager with Beacon Building Products, and you are tuned in to the Only Roofers Podcast.
Welcome to the Only Roofers Podcast. My name's Elizabeth and my co-host Vince here.
Hi, guys.
Today we have the pleasure of interviewing someone you all may know, Reggie Brock. Welcome, Reggie, to the show.
Thank you. Good to see you and good to be with you. And you, this is the second time around in about a month. Played golf together.
Played
I
golf.
sure hope you're better at this than you were at that.
I don't think I played
He's not.
golf. I'm
He's
pretty
not.
sure I
I
drove
got-
the golf cart and you played golf and I watched.
Well, it was fun.
I was a great spectator. I gave the golf clap. I did the great job.
So it's not going to take much for this podcast to exceed my expectations
No.
after playing golf
No,
with
no.
you. I got you.
So that's mainly because I'm doing it.
Exactly.
Whoa. Wow.
I'm kidding.
Yeah.
So I have seen you for many years in the industry. Let's talk a little bit about how you got into roofing and your journey here.
I came out of college as a biblical studies major.
Wow.
Yeah, and
Didn't expect that
I was
coming.
actually
I did not either.
I went on the evangelistic field, traveling, preaching for
that's why you're a
probably
good
10
sales
years.
guy.
Or not.
Selling the book.
My sermon, I gave my first sermon when I was 5 years old.
Oh, really? Yeah. Well, I wasn't quite that, but I grew up in a preacher's home, and so I just kind of thought that was going to be my life.
Right.
Went to college and got out and started traveling, and I had a divorce that kind of snuck up on me. And in my religion and my denomination, you get divorced, you got to find a new career. And so I found roofing, and
Wow.
the opportunity for me gave me a quick chance to make some quick money, which
How
is
did
what I
you
need.
find roofing?
Funny story. My nephew is a builder in Dallas. And so we were living in Georgia, literally our lives fell apart. And it's mostly because I made some really bad decisions. And so my wife was like,
What a great self-awareness.
it was backed
Hindsight.
by a lot of data.
There's a lot of data.
Yeah, to support my notion. And so my wife said, hey, why don't we move to Texas? Because that's where my family was from. And my son at the time had not been able to spend a lot of time with them. So I'm like, well, let's
Nothing
go.
to lose.
So we moved over there, and I had no idea what I was going to do. None. And so my nephew, who is, again, a builder, came up to me and said, hey, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't really know. He said, can I make a suggestion? I said, well, of course. He said, why don't you try roofing? And I looked at him, and I said this, it's not that bad yet. And so he started talking to me about how much money these guys were making. And I'm like, well, I understand the insurance side of it, so maybe I can do this and it'll work out. And so I literally, in 2010, I worked there was a good storm in San Antonio. I went down there and literally started knocking doors, getting up on roofs that I didn't
Selling
belong
roofs.
on.
You started as a door knocker?
Yeah, I was
Door
a door knocker. Yeah.
What?
And now he's the world famous Reggie Brock.
Yeah, I'm just famous, really, to my own self. So I
Wow.
started knocking doors. First roof I ever sold, I got up there and didn't know what I was looking at, damage. And all the guy, and he's a good friend
Who
of mine
trained
today.
you?
Brandon
Reggie.
Smythe, if you watch this, he owns Ken Elliott Roofing, and they got a great company, but
Yeah.
he's like, dude, knock the door, tell them we're going to give them a inspection. Hell came through, just the same stuff.
Yeah.
And then I did that, but I came off the roof, and I told the lady, I'm like, I think there's damage up here. Honestly, my training came from an adjuster 3 days later who came out and got up on the roof with me, and I said to him, I was just being honest. I'm like, I have no idea what I'm looking at. So he took me on a 30-minute crash course on what damage was looking like, and so
No shout out to him.
Yeah, I don't remember who it was.
Oh.
But
Shout
he,
out to you, buddy.
yeah, he helped me
Shout out
with
to
that.
that.
And then when I got on the ground, I knew what to do. I understood the policy, and I understood directives, and I understood all that. So anyway, that's how I got into roofing. And then
How long did you do that for?
about 5 years.
Were you any good?
I think so. I got sold a bunch of roofs, and selling was not my problem. It's direction. Not from somebody else, but what I wanted to do with my life. I was 50 years old,
Wow.
and I'm having to start over.
Reinvent yourself.
Yeah, and I knew what skills I had. I just didn't know the platform I was going to be able to utilize them on. And roofing just worked for me.
How did you reinvent yourself and have the courage to reinvent? Because that's scary.
Well, it is
Especially-
scary, but when you're desperate, you have to make
Yeah.
decisions.
There's no other choice.
I had to pay bills. I had to prove to my wife in particular and my son that it ain't over till I quit. And I was not going to quit. And I was going to rebuild this thing. And we were going to come back financially. I just needed to find a quick cash opportunity, and roofing was it. And then it kind of developed into, I was really, really good at getting deductibles.
What was your dynamic with your new wife? Like now that you had already had, let's talk about some of the lessons that
Yeah.
you learned
Oh,
there.
gosh, yeah.
Let's talk about the
Marriage,
data.
marriage number one versus marriage number two.
Yeah.
You're still married now,
Yeah,
thankfully.
32 years.
Yeah, so let's talk about that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's great. You got another opportunity, and now you've
Yeah.
found something
So
else.
the biggest thing I learned is you can't lie and live in happiness.
Mm-hmm.
In my first marriage, I just wasn't my authentic self. So when we started dating, I determined what I thought, and this is kind of the sales guy coming out of me, but it's really the manipulator in me.
Yeah.
I was like, I know what she wants,
I'll just be
and
that.
I'm going to be that. And so I did. We had a very quick courtship, and we married, and like literally two and a half, 3 weeks into the marriage, she's like, I'm not sure what I got here. Because listen, let me tell you
You
something.
can only fake it till you make it for so long.
At
Yeah,
some
exactly.
point, who you really are, people are going to find out.
Yeah.
And so that's the big lesson that I learned. So after that, I decided, love me or not, I'm going to be me.
I love that.
And then I was blessed to meet the woman that I'm married to now for 32 years.
Who loves you?
And she decided that she was going to help me stay authentic. And
So much easier.
It is. And if you're not hiding stuff and you're not trying to, fake your way through life, it's just easier to breathe.
You can breathe, yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Weight off your shoulders.
And so that's the biggest lesson I learned, not just in marriage, but in life. You have got to, we're all endowed, I feel, with certain giftings and uniqueness, that the more we hide that, even if we don't think it's as accepted by people as we want it to be, when we live that, then we can produce into our environments something that's contributing. Because if I'm
Are we
trying
at church?
to,
I love it.
Yeah.
Amen.
if I'm you, if I'm trying to, I see characteristic and traits in you, and I'm not saying we shouldn't learn from each other, but if I try to build my life around what traits you exhibit, I lose my uniqueness and effectiveness that I was originally designed to be.
Yes.
So now I go
You're trying to
like,
be
this
someone
is who
else.
I am, and if it doesn't contribute to your life, it will somebody, because here's what I believe. There's this gravitational force that all of us have that pulls things to us
Absolutely.
that belong to us
Absolutely.
and that we can contribute to and create value with.
But you only get it if you're authentic.
Exactly. So if I'm trying to be you,
It's kind of hard.
I can't, exactly.
How
I can't draw out and get what I need out of life because there's no magnetism to it.
how do you measure
Yeah.
being authentic versus working on yourself? Because you had some things that you had to work on,
Yep.
right? You couldn't ignore that and sweep that under the rug.
Yep.
And you wanted to stay true to yourself. So how do you work on yourself and still stay authentic?
Well, I think they're one and the same. If I'm constantly aware, so I have this practice every day where I am constantly thinking about and actively aware of challenges that I know are here that have got to be developed, and I'm mindful of them. And so my development is tied into my awareness.
Do you have like an exercise every day you do?
Well, yeah, I mean, like some of my challenges I've named, right? I mean, because they become companions of mine. And I can see them rearing their head, and I have to shut them down. So the development I need is just a lifelong, everyday, breath by breath process that keeps me authentic.
Self-awareness.
Yeah, it's not just self-awareness, but it's development. It's like
the
she was
greatest
talking
enemy
about.
that we have is the enemy within.
Exactly. Many times our greatest weakness is just the flip side of our greatest strength. And you got to develop, and I mean, you've got to commit to that. And sometimes it's painful because we want to be affirmed and validated, and we're so vertically minded. And what I mean by that is we think if we can build our kingdoms wide, but the problem is when a storm hits, width doesn't keep you grounded. You know what does? Depth. And depth comes from development. And depth comes from me saying, I'm going to dig deep so that when challenges do come, I'm prepared for it.
You're not swept away.
Exactly. And that's the problem you see with a lot of people is they have built a lot of width.
Right.
I'm sorry, a lot of this. Is it horizontal?
Yeah, it's
Horizontal.
with it.
Yeah,
It's with
horizontal,
It's
I got
with
it.
Not vertical.
You got it.
Horizontal, right?
You got it.
But not
That-
vertically.
They're just not. They
They're
have
not in
no
deep
depth.
enough.
They're not deep enough.
And so we're impressed by their width, but the storms aren't unless they have depth.
Yeah.
They have
And
no staying power.
and another part. So in our industry, right?
Yep.
There's a lot of great men, a lot of great leaders who are not living to their full potential because they have not identified this, right? A lot of people identify it sometimes when it's so late that you just got to redirect, change your game, change everything. How would you advise someone who maybe it's not too late for them to kind of figure out their current situation and start trying to gain that depth?
Such a great question, because what I really believe is it's never too late until I just quit, right? I restarted at 50.
That's terrifying.
I mean, it's a little nerve-wracking.
It's freeing.
But at the same time, when you get to a point where all else is over, you think, unless you believe that, you can always get back and redo stuff. So to your point, I hear a lot of people talking about legacy. And so legacy has an expiration date on it. And what I believe is this: the legacy I leave, listen, is the legacy I have lived.
Ooh.
And so if you want to change what people will think about you when you're gone, it starts with the next decision you make today. So as long as I've got the capability of decision making, I can reshape whatever I am into whoever I need to be. And so it's just, but I mean, it's just that
You have to make the decision.
tedious process. And the biggest problem is most people don't want to put the work in. I did. I'm just like, I'm not in like this, because I told and you can ask my wife and son today, I was always afraid that my legacy would be all about my setbacks. I believe now, once my story is told, there'll be more memory for my comeback than my setback.
Look at how many other people you impacted now, and you have the opportunity to get out in front of because
Of your story.
even though maybe your journey started with being a pastor and
Yeah.
evangelist, which is very powerful, there's something great for people who are meant to serve others.
Yeah.
Maybe you're just meant to serve others in a greater way that was bigger than you could have ever dreamed
No
of.
doubt. And I think that's, again, so well said, because many times our aspirations were never intended for us, because something jumps up and that like attracts us and we run after it. We're not prepared for it. But the fact of the matter is, I think that every step I take is ordered.
Yeah.
And even when I've stepped out, I can step back in. And so I guess what I would say to people that are hearing this today is, you have got to determine that what you are is not over. What you can become is still available. I don't care what your age is. I don't care what your nationality is. I don't care your gender. It doesn't matter.
Do you think people are just scared of putting in the work, though? Or do you think
There's
they're
no
scared
doubt
of
about it.
change because it's the unknown?
So that's an
People are
interesting-
more scared to be real with themselves, is my opinion.
That's right.
Like
It takes
real and
you gotta
unknown.
be real. I mean, he was real because he had no choice but to be real.
Right.
But how many of us wait for that moment to say, "I'm gonna be real"? And that's
Especially
really what
if
it
times
is.
are good.
Yeah.
You could be at the top, and it could be horror in the back, in the closet, the skeletons, everything
Yeah.
like that. You could
So
have horrible things going
I
on.
want you to think about this. Recently, I just saw a series on TV about icebergs.
Okay.
And they're beautiful, but the interesting thing about it for me was it showed in this documentary that less than 10% of what an iceberg is above the surface. The mass of it is under the surface, and it's not the 10% above the surface that wrecked the Titanic. It was the 90% below the surface that they didn't see coming. And so I think what happens to us is that we're trying to fix everything that
The
doesn't
top.
change anything.
Surface level.
All surface. I call them apples. I mean, it's the fruit of our life is seen by people around us. So but that's the 10% of us.
Yeah.
I mean, we got so much more inside of us, and it's that inside of us that is what creates the outside of us. Listen to me. So people try to change the fruit. The fact is,
You gotta change
unless
the
you
tree.
change the root,
The roots.
the fruit don't change.
Right.
And so the dig for me is always this. I've got challenges inside of me that nobody sees. I
We all
don't
do.
talk about, but I can't lie to myself. I heard somebody say this morning in a group call I was on, they said, we need to quit lying to ourselves. I don't think you lie to yourself. I think you know when you're not telling yourself the truth. And then we use this camouflage.
Ignore.
And the fact is, I know where I'm weak, and I know what I've got to do to change it. The question is, am I brave enough, courageous enough, and I won't put the work in for it? Because if you want the fruit of your life to change, dadgum, rip the root up, and start over. And that's where people don't want to work. It's just too hard. I mean, that's what people think, or it's not worth it.
What would be your encouragement to that person who's saying, maybe this is too hard? What can they look forward to within themselves?
Yeah.
What's going to be on that other side of that
You
hard
did it,
work?
but you got to admit it's scary.
Yeah, it's hard. And I think the reality of it is everything that you had hoped for, that you messed up in and you broke, you can fix, but you've got to put your hand on the plow and start grinding. Listen, my wife, some of the mistakes I made, listen, it took 5 years for her to get past it. I don't know that she's ever passed everything, but I had to say to myself, whether she's giving me the response I want or not, I'm grinding. I'm gonna prove to her that this ain't happening again. And so if you're willing to put the work in, I'm telling you, everything you've hoped for and thought would happen to your life is still available. Keep grinding, pressing, and making better choices. That's what I would say.
I love
Amazing.
that. I
I love
love
it.
that. Thank you so much for sharing
Thank y'all.
your
Thank you.
positivity, your great message. I think there's so many people out there that can benefit from seeing someone's story, putting yourself out there,
Yep.
letting people know what you've been through. So I appreciate you. We respect you,
That was
and we
amazing.
thank you for being on our show.
And I appreciate y'all and the work you do for our industry. Thank you so
Appreciate
much.
it. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone,
See
for
ya.
watching another episode of the Only Roofers podcast. Catch you guys on the
See
next
you now.
one.